All right, so we have this base scene that we worked a bit with in the previous lesson. If you considered yourself a bit of a non-beginner, we just created a plane basically. That was the only thing that kind of translated into this lesson. So we just created a plane with 500 by 500 centimeters. Nothing else has been done. So as long as you create that, we're on the same page. So the way that we will work through this is basically like if you would be sketching this out. You would kind of do a rough pass first with basic shapes, and like build out the character and then go through and adding details passes basically. It's just so we don't get stuck on like small details on certain shapes. So we kind of do a first rough pass with very basic geometry, and then we add details later on as we go through the process. So we can just kind of view the whole design from a bit more of a wider perspective rather than focusing on very, very small details at first. So since the main body is made up of this poncho that I drew out previously, that's going to be my starting point for my design. So we'll just hop into Cinema 4D and start creating that. Okay, so the first thing that we can do obviously is to create our cone. So we'll do that by coming over here to our primitives. I'll click and hold this cube here, and we can find our cone right around here. So I'll just release on that. And we can go ahead and just move this up a bit. And I'll actually go ahead and activate our scaling tool. So if I press, let's see, T, or hit the scaling tool here, we can go ahead and scale this uniformly. So if I just drag wherever in the scene, I'll start scaling it down like this. And I'll probably set it to something around here. The scale of the scene is something that you can decide yourself, basically, when it comes to the design. If you would be simulating some of these things, that's when the actual scale of the scene would kind of be a bit more important. But for us, it doesn't really matter. So I think we can just scale this to a size that feels right in terms of our environment. So I'll scale it to something around here. I'll go ahead and move this down roughly just so we can fit some legs in. Maybe something around, I'll set it to around 63 centimeters above the ground, basically. I can actually go ahead and get some radius on our top here, so we have something where the character's head will come out of. If the sliders are getting too much of a reaction for you like this, I kind of want to dial this in a bit more detailed. You can come over to these yellow handles here and like scale it down. So I'll set my top radius here somewhere around 16 centimeters, like that. And I'll just kind of scale this bottom radius out just a bit, just so we have somewhat of a more interesting shape like this. And something that we can go ahead and do immediately is also remove these caps. So an easy way of doing that is just to have the cone selected, come over here into caps, and I'll just uncheck this caps option here. So now this object is hollow, so we can start filling our character out. We don't want a solid cone as a body. And we can actually also go ahead and create our color. So instead of creating a completely new cone with like new parameters, we can actually just go ahead and duplicate this cone. So there are multiple ways of doing this. You can just hold Control-C and Control-V and copy it like you would in any other software. You can also Control-Drag here in our Objects panel, so we create another one. But you can also Control-Hold in here. So if I, for example, have this Y-axis selected here or highlighted, I can Control and drag this up so we get another copy here. And I'll go ahead and hit our rotate tool. I'll select this Z-axis rotation here. I'll start dragging it, and then I'll hold Shift, which will make it available for me to snap onto these even degrees here. So I'll set it for minus or positive 180 degrees like this. And I'll go ahead and move it up a bit. And obviously we don't want this tall of a color. So I can just come into our cone here, go into Object, and I'll scale the height here down quite a bit. And I can go ahead and just set the height here to around 9 centimeters is where I'll put it at. And we'll go ahead and move it down. It doesn't need to be snapped to the poncho precisely, since we'll have our kind of knot being tied around the collar here. So it doesn't need to be snapped perfectly. But if you do want to align it perfectly, we can come over here to our fore view, so you can view it from a more precise perspective and just kind of really dial it in something around there. But I'll come out of here, and a really fast way of hopping in and out of these, I might not have shown you this previously, but if you scroll click, so if you take your scroll mouse button and click within the window, you can just hop back and forth between these different windows. This is kind of how I usually do it. So if you don't see me pressing this button but hopping in between, that's what I'm doing. So I'll just come over back to our perspective view, and we'll go ahead and scale down this radius here, obviously, because we don't want this to feel like a full-on cone like a dog or a cat would have. It's supposed to be a nice looking collar. So I'll just come over here to our radius here and just drag it down somewhere around like 21, 22 centimeters, something like that. Yeah, I think that's looking decent. So obviously we want a head for our character, and the easiest way of doing that, of course, is to add a sphere. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll come over here to our primitives again, press and hold, release it on the sphere. And I'll just go ahead and drag this all the way up somewhere around here. I'll also activate our scale tool or press T and just scale it down just a bit. Somewhere around 20 centimeters is where I'll set it. I want a pretty large head, and we can come over here and also move it up just a bit so it's not intersecting with our collar here. I just activate our move tool, drag it up just a tad, somewhere around 110 centimeters, something like this. We'll go ahead and add our first deformer for this character, because I don't want the head to be a fully universal round shape. I want some kind of definition as the head kind of forms into the shin. We are making a stylized character, but I still want some form of interesting shapes. So instead of actually going in and tweaking each individual vertice or face on these geometries, it's just better to use a deformer to just roughly shape your primitives instead of doing it manually. So we'll come over here to our deformers tab. Just click and drag, and I will release it on a taper. And the taper basically does exactly what it sounds like. It tapers the shape that you're putting it in. So I'll just take our taper, drag it, release it as it's highlighting the sphere like this. And instead of actually like manually shaping it to the sphere, I can actually set fit to parent. So our sphere is a parent of our taper currently. So if I just hit fit to parent, that's what it's going to do. And if I start adjusting the strength here, you can tell that it's tapering the wrong side of the sphere. So if we just change the alignment to -y instead of +y, we can hit that and nothing really happens, because you need to hit fit to parent again. So once you've done that, you can start to actually adjust the tapering of the head. And I'll set it to nothing too extreme, like somewhere around 15%. I just wanted to taper off the head just a bit, nothing too much. I still want a round and nice head. And I think we can actually also just scale the Y of the taper just a bit, so we're not getting too much of a taper even. So maybe something like this. Yeah, I think that's decent. And as you can tell, like previously, we don't have a lot of detail going on in any of these geometries. So we can come over here to our display tab, activate Gauge shading lines, and we'll kind of see how many segments we have working with. So obviously we can increase the sphere quite a bit. We can actually set this to 64 segments. So I'll just change it to that. So we're getting a lot more detail in there now. And you can also see what more of a difference the taper is making. And I'll actually go ahead and hide the taper. I think it's a bit obstructing when you see the deformers like while you're working. And we will be adding more deformers, So we don't want to manually hide every single deformer as we add them. So a good way of hiding deformers is just to filter them out. So you can come over here to our viewfinder panel here and go into filter. And here we can basically turn off a bunch of things. But we currently just want to hide the deformers basically. So they're still there. So if I go and select the taper, it will still be visible, but it won't be visible as we're working through the scene, which is kind of what I wanted. And we'll want to do the same thing with the poncho and the collar. We'll want to get some more segments in here. So if I just select both of these, I'll hold shift and click both of them. So we see that we have both of them selected. And I'll set the rotation segments to around 48. And we want a bit more of an even distribution along the poncho here. As you can tell, these segments look very nice and square almost, and these are very, very long and stretched out. So we want just a bit more of an even distribution. So if I just increase the height segments here to around maybe, something around 20, I think that's looking nice. I do think I should mention that while you're currently working through your scene, it's really good to make a habit of actually naming things and grouping them correctly, because we will be adding a bunch more items. And if you just have an objects panel here where it just says sphere 1, sphere 2, cone 1, it's going to be a mess. So while we're at it, let's make this a habit to begin with. So I'll just select this cone, which is our poncho. I will hold Alt and G, which will create a null. So I've just made the cone a child of this null. If you just create a null like this, it will create it at the center of the scene. But if you have an object selected and hit Alt G, you will group it. And if I do that to this null, I will group. You kind of get how this works. If you've worked in Illustrator or Photoshop, for example, like it's the same thing as a group basically. Or in After Effects, it would be the same thing as a pre-comp maybe. But I mean, you do have nulls in After Effects as well, so maybe you know how they work. But a null is basically just an empty object. It doesn't contain anything. It doesn't contain any geometry. It's just a way for us to put things within them. If I were to, for example, move our cone here to the right within the null's position would still stay in the center. But if I were to, if I were to, example, rotate this right now, I would rotate it from the axis of the null and not the cone. But if we were to, for example, move the null, which is the parent of the cone, everything like under this null will then follow with. So I'll go ahead and name this newly created null that we just made. So I'll just name this poncho. I will do the same with the collar. So I'll hold Alt and G. And I'll just double click it to name it collar. We'll do the same thing with the head. So I'll just hold Alt G. We'll name it head. Simple as that. I'll also do the same thing for the plane here. So I'll just group it and name it ground for now. With that kind of in place, we have done our first actual work within Cinema. So with that, obviously, it's a good thing to keep in mind to save your project. Autosave is something that isn't default in Cinema, which means that you do need to activate it if you haven't done it before. So I'll actually just go ahead and show you how to do that, because if you notice that you haven't had autosave on and something crashes, it's just the worst pain that you can imagine. So we'll come over here to edit, go down to preferences, and we'll go to files. And I have it enabled already, obviously, because I'm not a fool. So yeah, just make sure you have that set to save. You can set it to what amount of minutes you want it to automatically save at, how many copies you want. I've set it as a folder destination outside of my Dropbox, so I don't clog up my upload speed and stuff. But usually the default setting is just to have it at project, and that will create a backup autosave file within your project directory. So wherever you save your file, basically. So yeah, with that kind of set, I think we can move on to the next lesson. So I'll see you over there.